So good morning, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. My name is Tom Deacon. I'm a partner at Barker Associates, and I lead our energy and sustainability activity within the business, working with schools and academies up and down the country, as well as other public sector bodies. And we've put this webinar together today predominantly around the Low Carbon Skills Fund Phase 4, which has recently been released, really just to give everybody some guidance and hopefully some helpful information around the process. This is the fourth round of Low Carbon Skills Fund run by Salix. And as an organisation, Barker have supported many schools and academies up and down the country to secure money to help drive forward their decarbonisation agenda. And to date, we've secured probably somewhere in the region of about £3.5 million for clients up and down the country. And with it being phase 4, we've got a fairly good idea now of what good looks like from a bidding point of view. So today really is just to help you start to prepare in what is relatively short timescales. So just in terms of the session today, we'll cover a little bit around eligibility and funding. Also look at some of the focus, so what really makes a good low carbon skills fund bid. Talk you through the process for submission and information that you'll need to start gathering already in order to do that, and then talk you through the application process, and then a little bit around looking ahead to the complementary funding stream, which is public sector decarbonisation. So we'll go through that shortly. So just in terms of a bit of background then, this latest round was launched by Salix just before Easter on the 28th of, sorry, that should say March, not May. And we're expecting around £17 million worth of funds that have been made available for this particular funding round. And fundamentally, this is a fund to help organisations like yourselves to develop and create heat decarbonisation plans and designs for low carbon heating. And I'll come on to that a little bit more shortly. And what this effectively should do is then allow you to gather the data, progress designs, etc., to allow you to put some really strong public sector decarbonisation scheme capital bids, which we're informed is due to open in early autumn 2023. So effectively, this is the groundwork, the enabling work to then hopefully allow you to undertake a public sector decarbonisation bid. However, it's not just about PSDS and the process that we often advocate and follow ourselves. We'll also throw up some information and allow you to gather data around energy audits and perhaps other low carbon technologies, which could well allow you to implement some stuff very quickly without the need for PSDS as well. So hopefully, if you can secure some of this funding, then it is a valuable way of gathering other data alongside that in order to start to come up with ideas around how you can save money and carbon on across your estate. So why are Salix focusing on the decarbonisation of heat? Well, in simple terms, the use of gas and oil fossil fuels for heating and hot water generation will emit the most amount of carbon per per kilowatt of heat that's generated. And as you can see from looking at that, is this information which comes from the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, oil boilers and then gas boilers are the two biggest contributors to CO2 across the estate. And there's lots of rhetoric in the news and in the media around the need to reduce fossil fuel consumption. And so the government department that now look after Salix are now quite rightly focusing these funds specifically on removal of fossil fuels from heating and hot water generation. So that's really the why. In terms of eligibility, the fund is open to all public sector bodies, and specifically we've reached out to you individually as either existing or prospective new clients for around the academies sector. And we are also supporting some local authorities and some central government bodies as well around this particular fund. In terms of criteria, there is always within these funds additionality. So if you've already commissioned or completed reports, for example, then you can't retrospectively apply for the funding to offset costs you've already expended. And fundamentally, whatever you do as part of this bid application process, you have to be ready to complete all of the activity by the 28th of March 2024, and that will align with the funding periods that SALIX work to. However, we expect public sector decarbonisation scheme to open in the autumn. We are expecting that following successful submission of bids, then applicants for this particular funding round will expect to hear in the next few months. So there is a window of opportunity potentially to undertake some heat decarbonisation plans or further design development if you've already got a heat decarbonisation plan, to enable you to put a bid in the autumn. Now that's a very compressed timescale, and that might not be for you and your organisation, but fundamentally there is an opportunity potentially to run from LCSF straight into a public sector decarbonisation capital bid. So just something to think about. And new in this year, there's now a maximum grant value of £1 million, which for most of our clients is you'd be well below that, but just again to be mindful. A new feature for this round 4, is the introduction of funding caps. So what this means is that applications received will fit into one of the 3 bands, so up to 100,000, between 100 and 500,000, and then between 500,000 and £1 million. And once each one of these bands has been fully allocated, then that will be it. So and I actually think this is a positive thing for the schools and academies sector. Most of the bids are likely to be in the bottom 2 tiers, and therefore what that means is if there is a number of large organisations, for example NHS trusts, central government, local authorities, if they submit bids of a very high value and they get approved first, that means that there is still an opportunity to secure funding in the lower 2 bands as well. So a new feature of the fund this year, I think it's a positive one, because it means that smaller organisations or organisations putting a smaller grant fund application in are likely to be, you're not going to be prejudiced by larger organisations putting in big bids and using up all the money. But again, this grant value cap of £1 million comes into play as well this year. So the focus of funding, and I've touched on this briefly, but just to really clarify, fundamentally, this fund is to allow public sector organisations such as yourselves to engage specialists and get expert advice to identify and develop a heat decarbonisation plan. That might be a plan per school, for example, which is the most common approach. It might be a more high-level plan across your entire estate, but fundamentally it has to have a focus on energy efficiency and low carbon heat upgrade projects, and would only cover non-domestic buildings. So what this is really trying to do is pump prime and enable organisations like yourselves to gather the technical information on cost, on detailed scientific calculations on carbon reductions, and also look at risk and program around delivery of decarbonisation of heat within your buildings. And fundamentally, that will be removal of gas or oil-fired fossil fuel systems on the whole, and we'll be replacing them with a low carbon heating technology. Now, that may well be air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. In certain circumstances, that could mean connection to district heating, but that's pretty rare in the context of the school sector. So fundamentally, that's what it's there to do. But as I said earlier, the standard format that we operate in order to do a heat decarbonisation plan, you have to do an energy audit. That also might identify some short and medium term things that you could go away and do straight away around things like controls and insulation, some of which might be zero or low cost to implement as well. So it's effectively your heat decarbonisation plan will give you a roadmap to reducing the need for fossil fuels at any of your specific sites, or indeed across an entire portfolio. So there's a lot of work done as part of the reports and in the plan around looking at the alternatives to gas and oil heating and hot water. Really, though, the main focus of this funding is around buildings where your boilers, your heating system, or your hot water systems are at the end or approaching the end of their economic life. And this is quite clearly a way that Salix will target the funding to those projects that are likely to come first. So there is nothing stopping you developing a heat decarbonisation plan for a building where you may have relatively new boilers, but there will always be a leaning towards those where they're end of life, and you will be asked to supply condition information as part of your submission. So just bear that in mind. It is more, in our experience, you are more likely to be successful if you triage. So if you have multiple sites and maybe 5 or 10% of those are approaching that have boilers and heating systems that are approaching their end of their life, they're the ones you should bid for. I'm not suggesting that you can't get funding but you will need to be able to demonstrate that those boilers will be needing to be replaced fairly soon. So clearly just a way through the process of triaging funding to those projects of highest need. So what can you bid for? So there's 3 elements really. Well, really there's only 2. Funding to develop or improve a heat decarbonisation plan. So there is a fairly standard set of requirements around heat decarbonisation plans. We've developed templates over the last 3 rounds of LCSF, which have all gone through Salix audit process and generally have been well received. And so you can apply for funding for one or multiple sites to complete those heat decarbonisation plans. Alternatively, where perhaps you've already done a heat decarbonisation plan, or you've got a project that's potentially on your list of capital works that are required, then you can apply for funding to develop standalone detailed designs from pre-existing heat decarbonisation plans. So I'm working with a number of clients at the moment where we've just concluded their heat decarbonisation plans that were funded through the last round. We're now using that data to determine which projects are going to be their PSDS bids for capital funding, and therefore we're already working up bids for certain organisations to develop those detailed designs. So that's taking it from a heat decarbonisation plan, which is largely a sort of audit and feasibility, right the way through to actually developing out the technical design. And by doing that, your public sector decarbonisation capital bid is likely to be far stronger because it's lower risk, because the design has been developed and the costs have been refined, etc., etc. So you can apply for funding to do that as well, or you can apply for a combination of both. And again, we're working on grant fund applications for a number of clients where they've already done some heat decarbonisation plans. They want to now develop some of those out into full designs because they are going to turn into low carbon heating projects. But at the same time, there's a number of sites that they didn't bid to do heat decarbonisation plans for in the past, and therefore they're looking to undertake some more of those as the condition of their estate changes and they've got more boilers and systems that need to be replaced. So a good opportunity, I think, to bid for some of the initial seed and development funding to really kickstart some of those projects. And certainly if you've already got schemes which you're maybe looking to bid for under SIF, or you're going to allocate school capital allocation SCA funding to in the coming few years, they're the sites I would look at closely, and then obviously to take a step back and look at the wider picture as well. So in terms of the application process, so the portal opens on the 26th of April, so really not long, hence why I appreciate it's Easter holidays for many of you, but hence why I wanted to get this in the diary so you were well briefed and informed. As with all of the PSDS and low carbon skills fund applications, it is fastest finger first. So it will be a first come, first served assessment process. And in our experience, successful applications in order to get considered will need to be submitted within the first 15 or 20 minutes of the application portal opening. That's our previous experience. It may wane as over time, but as it stands at the moment, those that get funded tend to be submitted very soon after the 2 p.m. portal opens. So it's really important to have all of your information ready, and we can support as necessary in that process. And there are two requirements. One is the completion of an online form, and the second is a supplementary buildings information tool, which is an Excel. And in simple terms, you will have to log on as quickly as you can. They will have already published the questions, or they have already published the questions that will go onto the online form. So you are best to have pre-prepared answers, bespoke to your trust. And that will need completing. And at the same time, once you've completed that online form, you will have to have completed the supplementary building information tool, and that Excel template is available already, so you can start that process if you wish already. And that will then need to be uploaded onto the website, and then you submit the application. And it's as simple as that, but it needs to be done very quickly in our experience. So in terms of preparing to get your bid documents, there's nothing to stop you doing that now. They've published the questions, they've published the supplementary buildings information template. All of that is there. And I would urge you, if you're considering doing a bid, go straight to those documents to date. I've got some links in the slide pack, and you can start to familiarize yourself with some of the information that's needed. But to summarize, you'll need all the information I've currently put on screen. So you'll need to determine who your authorizing official and project lead is. So that may require internal discussion. You'll need to determine which schools you're actually going to bid for, or which sites you're going to bid for. And that might involve a triaging discussion, as we discussed, based on condition. But you'll need to have information on URN, UPR, UKPRN information. Again, there's some links in the forms to help you identify where those numbers are. You'll need building area information. You'll need display energy certificate ratings and information, all of which to complete the forms. In the actual online application, you'll need to outline your current and future plans for energy strategy and decarbonisation. So again, if you've got pre-existing information, then it's good to have that. If not, you might need to write something. And if you require any support on that, then we can gladly do so. And then as well as that, you'll need condition info. So boilers in particular, given what I've already said around condition and focus, then really it's a case of having ideally independently verifiable information on boilers, on their condition rating, and that will be your sort of typical A to D, 1 to 4 priority ratings. But you'll also need to have information potentially on your building fabric, so the level of insulation you've got, etc., etc. Now, some of this information you may not have. If you're putting an application in that's over £100,000, you will need to automatically complete all aspects of the supplementary buildings information tool. If you're applying for a fund, a grant fund less than 100,000, then whilst if you've got that information, it's always good to submit it. It's not essential. There's two sections of data. One is essential, and the other is non-essential unless it's over 100,000. But this is where you need to apply some thought as to what you're bidding for. My advice would be, if you've got 10 schools, for example, and your condition data is saying 5 of them have boilers which are in good condition, then just think carefully about whether you want to throw those ones in, as well as some of those that are in poorer condition, because it would be dreadful to miss out on all of the funding because you've decided to include things which may be of a lower priority in Salix's opinion. You will also need to have key dates and a delivery program and information on risk. And you'll also have to have cost information on how much you're bidding for, but also breakdowns by different types of activity. So surveys and studies, design, development, calculations, etc. So again, we have quite a prescriptive way of doing that with a fairly standard fee model. But again, you'll need to have all that information available. They're actually now asking for quite a bit more information around risk and cost breakdown and program than they have in the past, and I'm assuming that's Salix sort of evolving their process. Fine, so lots of stuff that you can be getting on with straight away. I think the first discussion though has to be around what you're going to bid for, and if you need any support in making those decisions, then by all means do get in touch. And there's lots of information there which you can start to gather anyway. All told though, once you've got that information, it's not a massive questionnaire to fill in, and as long as you've got the data to hand, the supplementary building information tool isn't that particularly exhaustive. And once you've got all that information, the application process, subject to IT issues, shouldn't take you any more than about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. So it's not particularly onerous. However, it's all about getting prepared and getting ready to submit quickly. So that's just a screenshot there of the supplementary buildings information tool. That's the core information, all the stuff with the green columns. There is a further section of data, which is the other information that if you've got it, then I would strongly recommend you submit. So that's the Low Carbon Skills Fund. I'm happy to pick up questions shortly, but just before we do, I just wanted to just touch on public sector decarbonisation, or PSDS. I'm calling it phase 4. The last one was 3B. I don't know whether this one will be 3C or phase 4, but for argument's sake, regardless of naming, this will be launched in autumn this year, we've been told. And it's for the capital element of the Salix funding route. So everything we've been talking about before is around audits, feasibilities, studies, costs, and data gathering in order to allow you to do these PSDS bids. And in our experience, if you haven't got that data, it's going to be very, very difficult to put a robust PSDS bid in. It's highly technical. It involves having already done an element of design, having already calculated cost and carbon savings. And so, you know, if you've got any chance of getting a PSDS bid in successfully, and it will be scrutinized pretty heavily by Salix's technical advisors, then having that data from a heat decarbonisation plan will be, you know, essential almost. And whilst the Low Carbon Skills Fund is grant funding, it's 100% grant funding. There is PSDS is a match fund, so Salix will fund the marginal cost for low carbon heating systems, and what that effectively means is that the applicant, you guys, would have to fund at least the equivalent cost of a replacement conventional non-low carbon heating system. So you'll need to have the funds available or a commitment to fund the future the project, but that would be only for an air source, the equivalent cost of a, let's say, oil-fired system. So just to make it easy, if you've got a low carbon heating project that's going to cost £500,000, but to replace your boilers and heating system would cost you £200,000, then that £500,000 project would be funded £200,000 by you as the applicant and £300,000 by Salix. So again, just a way of being able to deliver projects which at the moment are clearly more expensive than a conventional fossil fueled heating or hot water system. Target applicants, so this is kind of like, you know, sweet spot bids, really have life expired plant, planned replacement within the next 2 to 3 years, funding allocated or secured for like replacement. So generally it suits SCA trusts over SIF, but that doesn't mean you can't progress some of those projects, and we are progressing projects where the school or the trust is contributing their element via SIF, but it does require the stars to align in terms of both bids coming through. So they are slightly, they are longer shots in terms of bids. So in terms of next steps, first of all, register. You'll need to register with Salix to have an account, and I would not be trying to do that, you know, too close to the deadline. Agree your bid scope and strategy. So what are you going to bid for? Then start to work up your application, and if you need support, then by all means we can help with that. And then you also need to develop some PSDS bid awareness, because effectively, these projects, the Low Carbon Skills Fund is to then enable PSDS projects. So just be mindful of that as well. I've put down some email addresses, and we'll circulate both the recording and the slide pack after this session. But yeah, if there's any further questions or you wish for further support, then do let us know. And just to signpost some useful links. So these are all links to Salix's website. Really good set of information on there. You can download all the application process forms, etc. So yeah, when we share this, you'll have access to those links to Salix's website. That's it from me. I haven't got anything further to go through, but I'm conscious some folk may have questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and then if anybody's got any questions, either feel free to just pop it in the chat or come off mute and fire away. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jo Marchant, and I'm in a late school mat. And previously, under Low Carbon Skills Fund 3A, we bid for heat decarbonisation plans to be done. So we've had all of those done. We got them in February. We haven't really had time to digest the contents because they're like, 8 schools, 40 to 80 pages each. So I'm just a little bit confused as to what exactly can I bid for in what we're calling phase 4 then, in terms of this.
Okay. Yeah. So fundamentally, if you've already got heat decarbonisation plans for all of your schools, then it's about digesting the content of those and looking at maybe, for example, your capital plan or your condition information that you may hold, and determining which, if any, of those sites are likely to require replacement boilers. And in this fund, you can then develop out the design, potentially even get the funding to go out to tender as well, and develop those projects to a point where your application to public sector decarbonisation plan will be really strong, Joe. So what that, rather than gathering the initial data, you can actually build on the plans you've already done to get those projects tender ready, or even indeed tender them as part of this project, part of this fund, should I say. So there's a way. If you've still got sites where you haven't got heat decarbonisation plans, and you have with some, then of course clearly you can bid for funding for HDPs to do a mop-up exercise. But it would be really to secure the funds to develop out those designs for projects where you may be considering doing that.
Right. Okay. So it's really about getting a feasibility study then done.
Well, yeah. So the heat decarbonisation plans themselves would only take it so far. So, but it's, you can actually get funds to develop out the full technical design. So you could go to REBA 4 on these if you wanted to. But they'd have to be projects that you are, pretty much certain you were going to go ahead with, I would imagine. But quite often you see, if you were to commission a mechanical design consultant to do a conventional boiler heating system, the design would be entirely different if it was a low carbon heating system. So what this does is give you the opportunity to secure the funding to do that alternative design, rather than risk paying abortive fees to a consultant if you then realised you couldn't afford to do it in a low carbon manner. So it gives you options. It really does.
Great. Thanks very much. That's really helpful.
Excellent. Oh, that's fine. Yep. So question from Barbara: what is considered end of life for gas boilers? How old do they need to be? So if you go to CIBSE guidelines, that's Chartered Institute of Business Service, Building Services Engineering, you're looking at sort of 15 years. Inevitably, boilers will go a lot longer than that, and some will fall over. It really depends on how well they've been maintained, and actually the kind of amount of use they've had as well. But 15 years is normally a rule of thumb. If you haven't got condition survey information, then it's worth considering getting that done. Alternatively, those who maintain your gas boilers could well be able to give you information on longevity. Generally speaking, the back of the boiler should have a boilerplate which will have the year of manufacture, and that will give you an indication. But of course, there's other variables. The other issue we come across quite regularly is boilers where they're reach the end of their life, and whilst they're working, you can't get parts. So again, it starts to become a resilience risk. So that's the rule of thumb I would use. Certainly anything that's less than 10 years old, unless you've got a catalogue of issues with that particular piece of plant, I would suggest that's probably not ready. Another question from Ms. Tant. We've had a heat decarbonisation plan completed a few years ago. We have had some of the actions completed. Do you think we need to get a new plan up to date? Tricky one to answer, if I'm honest. Would probably need to see the plan to see how it aligns. Certainly if it was over 5 years ago, I think the world has changed. And certainly a lot of the information that will need to go into a successful PSDS bid would need to be based on updated cost and carbon calculations. So more than happy to have a look at that report and see and just give you a sort of second opinion on whether that needs refreshing, by all means. Good. Another question in from Josh Toms. The slides mention the PSDS fund is more geared to SCA than SIF. Have you had or seen any success from SIF eligible trusts? Short answer is yes, but it does require the stars to align, as I've suggested earlier. There is an issue at the moment around timeline. So SIF bids we're currently waiting on the outcome for. But the PSDS bids won't be going in until October, most likely, or at least early autumn, they've said, and therefore you're looking at probably a decision in early 2024. So you can bid with confidence if you've already got SIF money, but you'll need to explain to the DFE that you're looking to put that fund towards a PSDS, and it may change timelines. We've also had schools which have funded directly as well. So rather than using SIF money, they've been willing to put in reserves as well to do that. So on the basis that it gave them a bit more certainty, and that one was successful. We're working on that now. But yes, a tricky one. But I am aware that the DFE and the guys at Salix are talking to try and get more alignment around low carbon funding, but at the moment it's a tricky one. It doesn't align very well, unfortunately. Okay, no problem. Good. So yeah, if I could just give a last call for any further questions. Say if others have got more detailed discussions and they want to set up a call to go through things with me or one of the team, then let me know. We'll be happy to help, of course. Good. Okay. Excellent. Right. Well, unless anyone else has got any further questions, then we'll call it there. My colleague Nor will circulate the slide pack and the recording to you all. And yeah, if you need any support, then please do get in touch. And I hope this morning has been useful. Thanks very much.